Okay guys, let's see how this first section went up here. So we were comparing the first one, 3/6 and 4/6. They have the same denominator, so we don't have to do much work here. We just compare them. So 3/6 is less than 4/6 because the numerator here, 3, is less than 4. All right, now we've got thirds and sevenths, so we've got to figure out a common denominator for thirds and sevenths. I'm going to grab a separate sheet of paper here to do my work so I don't clutter this up too much. So I'm going to list with my thirds, my 3. 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 4 is 12, 3 times 5 is 15, 3 times 6 is 18, 3 times 7 is 21. All right, I'm going to go ahead and list my sevens now. 7 times 1 is 7, 7 times 2 is 14, 7 times 3 is 21. So you can see that 21 is our least common denominator. And oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes the least common denominator will be the two denominators multiplied together. Even if it's not the least common denominator, it'll work. If you don't want to have to go through this, you can just say, well, I'm going to use 3 times 7 or 21 as my common denominator. Okay, you can't always do that. That will always work. So if I take 2/3 and I want to get the denominator of 21 here, I'm going to multiply. I'm going to use a dot for my multiplication. Multiply both top and bottom by 7, and that gives me 14 over 21 here. So 2/3 is equal to 14 over 21. And then 5/7 I have to multiply the denominator by 3 to get 21, so we multiply the numerator by 3, so we have 15 over 21. So you can see that 14 over 21 is less than 15 over 21, so 2/3 is less than 5/7. Now we've got 12/14 and 6/7. I love it when this happens. I know that 7 can multiply to make 14, so I only need to change one fraction here, and I'm going to use 14 as my common denominator. So 6/7 to get to be 14ths, we would multiply the denominator by 2, and so we'll multiply the numerator by 2, so we have 12/14 there. And you can see that 12/14 and 12/14 of course is equal, so 12/14 is equal to 6/7. All right, 8/12 and 5/9. Again, remember, you can always say 9 times 12 and use that as a common denominator. It might be a little harder work, but let's see if we can come up with a smaller least common multiple. So 12. 12 times 1 is 12, 12 times 2 is 24, 12 times 3 is 36. And I know that 9 also divides into 36, so I'm going to use my 36. So 9 times 1 is 9, 9 times 2 is 18, 9 times 3 is 27, 9 times 4 is 36. All right, so I'm going to use 36. Now, I could have multiplied 9 times 12 together and used that as my common denominator, but it would have been bigger numbers that I would have had to have worked with. Okay, so 8/12. I want to change that to 36. I have to multiply the bottom by 1, 2, 3, and the top by 3 then, because I multiplied the bottom by 3, so that's 24 over 36. 5/9, in order to get that to be 36, I have to multiply the bottom by 1, 2, 3, 4. So I multiply the top by 4, so that's 20 over 36. So I'm comparing 24/36 to 20/36. And of course 24 is bigger than 20. So 8/12 is larger than 5/9. All right, let's see how you did on the bottom row. Okay, 8/10 and 12/15. Well, I'm going to list the multiples of 10 until I find something that I think 15 would divide into, and maybe you already know that one, right? So 10 times 1 is 10, 10 times 2 is 20, 10 times 3 is 30, and I know that 15 times 2 is 30. So 15 would be 15 times 1 is 15, 15 times 2 is 30. So I'm going to use 30 as my common denominator. All right, so and by the way, just so you know, this is an alternate method for finding least common multiple. We used the ladder method earlier, but this is also a method for doing this. Okay, so we're going to take 8/10 and we're going to multiply it by something to make 30ths, so that would be times 3. And 8 times 3 is 24. So 8 tenths is equal to 24 thirtieths. 12 fifteenths, we're going to make that into thirtieths, so we have to multiply by 2. We multiply the numerator by 2, and that's 24 thirtieths, and we can see then that 8 tenths is equal to 12 fifteenths. All right. Now we're going to make this a little bit harder. We've got 1/8, and we've got 0 and 125 thousandths. So what we're going to do, first of all, is change our 0 and 125 thousandths to a fraction, or we could change 1/8 to a decimal. I'm going to go ahead and change my 0 and 125 thousandths. So I've got 1/8, and then this is 125 over 1,000. Okay? So you can look at it that way. Or I think an easier way to do this is to change the 1/8 into a decimal. So I'm going to take my 1 and divide it by 8, numerator divided by denominator, add a decimal point and a 0. 8 divides into 10 one time, subtract, and I get 2, add another 0, bring it down. 8 divides into 20 2 times, 16, subtract, and I get 40, add another 0, bring it down. 8 divides into 40 5 times. So you can see that 1/8 is 0.125, so these two are equal. Another way I could have done it is just gotten a common denominator for eighths and thousandths. All right, 50% and 3/7. So 50% is pretty easy to turn into a fraction. I make that 50 over 100, right? And let's reduce that now. So we can, instead of multiplying to make new denominators, we can reduce also. So I'm going to first of all divide both of these by 50, because 50 will divide into 50 and 100. We'll divide into both of those. So I'm reducing these now. And we've done this. We've practiced this. So 50 divided by 50 is 1. 100 divided by 50 is 2. So that equals 1/2. All right, so this is the fraction 1/2. And now we want to compare that to 3/7. So you might remember that common denominator for halves and sevenths is 14. So I'm going to change this to 14, which means I had to multiply this by 7 and this by 7. So that's 7/14. And I'll change this to 14ths. So that's times 2. And that's times 2, so that's 6/14. So you can see that 50% is bigger than 3/7. Now you might have been able to use some reasoning skills here without doing all of this work. You might think to yourself, well, half of 7 is 3.5, so this has to be less than half. So we know that 50% is greater than 3/7. We can find that out in a number of ways. All right, last one here then, 7/10 and 65/100. So I'm going to be comparing, let me get a fresh looking sheet of paper here. I'm going to be comparing 7/10 and 65/100. Well, I see that it would be very easy to multiply 10 by 10 to get 100 here. So that's the route I'm going to go. I'm going to make life easy for myself. So I'm going to multiply the bottom and the top by 10, because that will give me a denominator of 100 here, and that would be 70 over 100. And again, maybe you could use some reasoning skills here to figure this out. But you can see that I've got 65/100 here, and that's equal to 70/100, and so 7/10 is going to be greater than 65/100. Okay, do the next section and then check in with the next video to see how you did.